Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Workshop Wednesday. I'm Garrett Shaw, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys the basics of Adobe Illustrator again. This is episode 3, so today we're going to dive into the type tool. If you guys haven't watched the previous 2 episodes, please go ahead and do so, as some of that stuff will tie into what we're going to talk about today. But for the most part, this is going to be the start of working with typography and fonts and typefaces. So if that's up your guys' alley, get set, get strapped in, and get ready to follow along. So I've already got Illustrator loaded. I'm going to try to move pretty quick today because I realize that 45 minutes is a long time to ask you guys to sit and follow along. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and start up. I'm going to click on the type tool here. Before I do anything else, I'm just going to use the type tool. I have my character set to Arial just so it's a universal font that everybody has pretty much. If you're on Mac, I think you'll have like Calibri, but for the most part, just, I wanted a basic font. So we're going to go ahead and start off here. I'm just going to click in space. So grab the type tool. You can either hit T or click it from the menu over here. You're going to click in open space. And it's going to give you a cursor, not unlike Microsoft Word or anything else. And that's going to allow you to type. So I'm just going to type out my letters here. And there you go. Now what that does for me is it creates an object, just like the shape tool or just like a closed pen path. I can move it around. I can do anything I want with it. I can scale it up. I can rotate it. I can do anything I want to with that text as it stands. I'm just going to, like I said, I'm going to keep going through here. So the next tool we have is the area type tool. The area type tool basically works the same way as this, only you're essentially having to create a bounding box for it. So create that box, click on the area type tool, and then click on the box, and then I'm just going to copy and paste that over and over so you guys can see that it fills inside of the barriers that I've set with that box. Okay, it works sort of like a Word box on Microsoft Word or any other program that you've probably used previously. The other way to do that is, if you want to, you can use the type tool, click and drag, and create a box that way. But the thing that you can do with the area type tool that you can't do with just clicking and dragging is you can fill in rounded objects or all sorts of shapes and sizes of different objects. So it allows you to sort of create some unique effects if you need to have sort of a fill in terms of that particular space that you're working with. That'll come in handy if we ever do like a layout design or something like that. You can sort of create your area with a pen path and then fill in that area with text from there. Next up, we have type on path. We worked on the pen tool last episode, and so what we're going to do is we're going to follow right along with that. So I'm going to grab the pen tool. I'm just going to click a couple times. I'm going to click and drag and make a nice little curved path here, and then I'm going to click on the type on path tool and click right on that path, and it follows that path. The really cool thing about this tool is it will allow you to click on the path after the fact that the text has been created, and you can sort of bend it and manipulate it any way that you see fit to sort of fit your needs. Okay, so really cool, really handy way to sort of bend some text and do whatever you need to with it. You can get kind of ridiculous with it, but there are other tools that may or may not be as handy. It just depends on the situation. Next up, we have vertical type tool. So it sounds like exactly what it is. It basically eliminates the need to take a regular type tool and type in a W, then hit return and do that over and over and over. So that could get really tedious there. The other thing is that this will keep the letter spacing tighter. It also will keep the letters centered on a vertical line, where this one is left adjusting all of them. I'd have to turn it to like center alignment on the text to make that line up there by comparison. And again, you can see that the line is just a little bit tighter there. So I'll talk about some of the hotkeys and some of the features in the character panel here in a little bit after I go through the basics. So that's the vertical type tool there. Vertical area type tool, again, just like the area type tool before, you're just going to click inside of the object, and it's just going to fill it with vertical text instead. Okay, there's nothing too crazy there. I got to be honest though, I rarely use these two, just because if you really want the best quality results, you're going to end up typing all those words out and sort of adjusting them by hand at some time. But if you're looking for a quick fix, that can definitely be the way to go. Next up, we've got the vertical type tool, or type on path tool. So we're going to do what we did before and create a path. Grab that tool, click on the path, and there you have your sort of nice little vertical line. And again, you can do the same thing we did before, where we move that path around and it just adjusts the text to fit accordingly. All right, so it's pretty handy. It can be a really easy way to wrap things around objects. So if you need to type, for instance, if you want to make a logo or something and you want to type around the exterior of an object, you just use that type on a path tool. Click on the outside. You'll notice that it's typing on the inside. You can actually click on these little lines right here. I'll zoom in so you guys can see. You click on these guys and you can flip it to the exterior, and then if you click and space these out, that's how you control the little handles of a text when you're working on a path. You'll see that if I click on the middle one, I can actually move the position of the whole thing. So then you end up with sort of, you know, this nice top. We can work with the shape tool again. We'll get to the alignment panel, which I just used later on. Not this episode, that'll be later, but I'm just showing you guys this for example. So, you know, that's the start of your logo. If you wanted to, you could duplicate that again, flip it 180, you know, do sort of the traditional badge style where this text kind of keeps following along that path and go from there. You'll notice that it does get a little too large, so I'm gonna have to pull that back and then extend that again. I don't think it's gonna make it. I might have made that too large of a font. Probably did. So again, I'm using a whole bunch of hotkeys here. I'm just trying to demonstrate what you can kind of do with those tools. So in that case, that, you know, in the vertical type tool, you would wrap it around, you know, the exterior vertically. With the type on a path tool, it would be normal, I guess, to say. It'll follow that path traditionally. Let's see. I'll leave that there just as the example. That's pretty much it for the core parts of the different type tool variations. The more important panel, if you are into layout design and you know, really working with the core mechanics of text and fonts, here is going to be the key panel for you. And what you're going to want to do is go to Window, Type, and Character. You can also hit Command and Control T, depending on if you're a Mac or PC, and it'll pull up this panel right here. This panel is the most amazing thing in the world in terms of text. What it'll do is, it will allow you to pick the font you want. Okay, so I'm just going to Workshop Wednesday it again, just for the sake of having it there. And I'm going to go through all the different things that this panel has in it. Okay, so with my text selected, I can change to italic, I can change it to bold, bold italics, or black. I can mix all those different weights up, you know, however I see fit. So if I want regular italic for that, you know, the whole thing, and then I want just bold italic for the other, that's how you go about doing that. You know, you just select it just like you would in any other word processing program, and then convert it, you know, to whatever you want it to be. Okay. Important things to note here is that if you have a piece of text selected and you turn it to, you know, like whatever the font is, you'll run into an issue if you have two different weights or two different styles. Whenever you double click on them, the font and the character set will kind of go away because it's conflicting. So you need to make sure that you're paying attention to that when you're, you know, making your highlights and your selections and things like that. Make sure that, you know, the whole thing should be Arial or whatever the font you want to work with is. It's just common stuff. Oh man, so many fonts. Hold on, guys. It's just gonna be at the top. There we go. So another thing, make sure you know where your fonts are. You get too many and it gets nuts. Don't install a whole bunch of fonts for no reason. I actually should go clean mine out. Anyway, so next up we're going to talk about the rest of the panel here. First thing in the panel is your font size. Okay, if you hover over any of these, they'll tell you exactly what they are and what they do. You can set the pixel value or the point value. I have mine set to pixels. You can set it to points. You can do whatever you prefer for scaling. But basically, you know, like a 32-point font or 48-point font, they're all going to be your different sizes and things like that. So if you're working in web and you need to see what a particular size is going to look like for reference, you got it right here. That's, you know, that's 48-point weight, and that could be, you know, header size or whatever you're going to use it for. Next up, we have the kerning. So what kerning is it's the space in between each individual letter. Okay, so the distance between the end of this W and the beginning of the O here is kerned to an automatic setting right now. Okay, you can change that to a couple of different values. You can turn it to metrics, which is more or less by default, or you can use optical spacing. I prefer optical spacing. I think it looks visually better. For most fonts, it's more appealing. But where this really comes in handy is when you want to work with an individual letter, or like if you're making a logo and things like that, and you really need to tweak those gaps in particular and really squeeze in one particular letter over the rest of the font. You know, just to make sure that, oh, there it is, it's tangent to the W now. You know, those are very particular set of details. They're very detail oriented things, but they're very thorough and very important to have a concept of how they work and how they function to really get the best type of work out of Illustrator for you. Next up, we have tracking, and tracking is going to be an entire line of characters at once. So instead of it being the gap in between them, it's going to be edge to edge. So here we go. We'll just go ahead and type down, and you'll see as I decrease the digits, the letters are getting closer and closer together. But you'll see that instead of it being just in between the letters, the individual letters, it's actually spacing the edge to edge rather than that gap in between them. So for instance, there you see that not all the letters are touching, just the R and the K are. That's because the spacing there doesn't line up via the kerning. So I know it sounds like a lot of weird different aspects, but trust me, it's worth it to really sort of learn these. There's a couple of hotkeys that I'll go over really quick just to help you guys out in terms of speed. First thing you're going to want to work with is the Alt key. So when you highlight something, you hit Alt. Whoops. When you highlight something, you hit Alt, and then you can hit left, and that will decrease the tracking. If you hit right, it will increase the tracking in a set of letters that you have selected. Alternatively, you can actually select an entire line without highlighting it, and then still hit Alt left and right on the directional pad on your keyboard, and it will do the same thing. So you can sort of condense everything together or space it out however you want to sort of take up or remove space. Very handy if you need to get wording into a particular location, but you don't have enough space to have it at, its default value. You can back it up, 20 points, 40 points. You can really get close, but you really want to avoid letters touching each other at all costs. After that, we have the text width and height percentage. So in this case, this is sort of weird. This is more of one of the, I guess you could say, artistic tools when it comes to fonts, because what it allows you to do is stretch them and scale them what would be the best way to describe this? Non non-symmetrically, I guess. So basically, or asymmetrically, basically you're able to scale them so that, you know, the width will be 50% as wide as the original font is. So you can kind of control those digits to the best of your abilities. If you need it to be something exact, is really where that's coming in handy. Otherwise, you can just click and not hold shift on an object, specifically text in this case, and sort of scale it, you know, to your heart's desire. The problem with that is, in case you can't tell, certain parts of the letters are way more thick than the other parts of the lettering. So, you know, if you ever need to reset that, you can go down there and type it in, and just make sure that your lettering is set accordingly. Again, you know, everything in here in this panel is controlled by number values. So it's either, you know, 1 pixel, 10 points, you know, everything has a value in there. So it's really important to cover that for you. Next up, we have the baseline shift. Baseline shift is what's going to balance letter in the overall line height. So for instance, we're gonna talk about sort of how do we, if we wanted these letters to sit in the middle of the W, you would just sort of bump them up using that baseline shift. And what that's going to do is that's actually going to shift the baseline of the font. As you can see here, that blue line that's underneath the lettering has been bumped up by 2 points, or 2 pixels in this case. So what that's doing is that's really pushing everything up, you know, those 2 pixels. As you can see, it doesn't line up with the previous text, right? So if we highlight that and then bump it up 2 pixels as well, now both of those baselines are going to be off. All right, no matter what you do to the font, that's gonna hold true to the remainder of the font. It's gonna be relative. So it's 2 pixels off of wherever you're at, unless of course you scale the font like I just did, in which case it'll scale the style. So because it went from 48 or whatever it was down to 13.65, which I don't know why Illustrator lets you do that, because you can't really have a half a pixel, but it just, you know, kind of guesses. It will essentially scale that that number value down. So instead of it being 2 pixels, it'll only be 0.96. Just to show you, if I did go back to 2 pixels and it stayed the same, it would be bumped up even further in this case. So you can see that those styles that you apply will always scale with your text. The key thing to know about the text tool in these cases is that it's all about experimenting. It's all about finding exactly what works for you in the given situation, in the given layout that you want to work with. So I'm just showing you sort of the basics of what all these different features do. The last thing I want to, or well, the second to last thing I want to cover, sorry, is what you can do with multiple lines of fonts, or multiple lines of text, I should say. By default, this right here is your leading. Okay, so your leading is going to be a default value based on the size of your font that you're using. So if I use a 40-point font, the default value for the leading is going to be 48 pixels, and that's going to be the space in between one line to another. Let me see if this might be a good way to represent this. Oh, that's inches. 48 pixels, 48 pixels. So just to showcase to you guys, the baseline of this right here is about right there. And you can see here that those lines, those blue lines, are essentially 48 pixels from the baseline of one line to the baseline of another. That's how that functions. So when you want to tighten up multiple lines of text, right? Like there's a big gap here, and we're looking at this, and you see that, okay, so from the bottom of that P, right? From that bottom of the P to the top of the W, there's a solid gap there that we could save space on when it comes to layout or the styling of this. And what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that by just simply selecting this and decreasing it to something like 36. And there you have it. At 36, those two are basically lined up almost flush with each other. There's a little bit of overlap there. But what that does for you is you see how much gap we just removed from that section there. So let me just hit Control Z there to undo. Control Shift Z will redo. But you can see how much space we've effectively, you know, given back to ourselves in this situation by sort of just changing a quick one number. It's really really handy to know that that can do that for you. The other thing that's important to note about this is that if I bump up any part of this line of text, it will change the entire line. So where baseline can change a letter individually, right? So I can do individual letters here. I can't, if I change this leading right on Wednesday where all these are, it's gonna stay together with the rest of the line. There's no way to break those. That's why baseline shift is really important to get sort of effects like this, right? That's just something to make note of if you guys want to do individual characters, or if you want to if you want to just adjust a particular part of a line, you want to use baseline shift. If you want to adjust the entire line, you want to use leading. All right, so that's how that's going to function for you guys. Last up, there's this little guy right here, and this is going to be character rotation. This is going to spin your individual characters in a percentage, or well, a degree based on numbers. So it goes all the way to 360 degrees, which be back to 0. But as you can see here, it's going to automatically space out the letters accordingly. But if you want to have upside down letters and things like that, you can go ahead and get that sort of effect by just typing those digits in there, setting it to 180, and then you get this weird, super weird upside down piece of text. All right. You'll notice that that's all still in line because it's all part of one piece of text. So again, that's a chunk of text there, right? So just hitting T, click this. Oh, and it will save your last setting of whatever the character style is. So these are upside down. So we want to right side those, so I'm going to change that back to 0. There we go, problem solved. One quick last point. I know I already said that a couple other things were the last point, but if you click down on this, you'll see that there are a couple of handy little tools in here, including all caps, small caps, superscript, and subscript. What these are basically, for instance, all caps is basically like hitting caps lock, but you can type regularly. Okay, so I don't have caps lock activated, but everything coming out will be capital. Okay, so capital letters. Okay, if I switch that to small caps, they're all going to be small, but if I hit shift and make an actual capital letter, then the letters will be a legitimate capital, and the remainder, where they would have been lowercase, will be small capital letters. You can turn that off by just clicking it again, and you can see that I didn't do anything. It's the actual program doing all that work for me and converting that all to caps. It's a big time saver because you don't have to change the weight of that font or the size of that font. It automatically will adjust it for you to make those all lowercase or smaller capitals. Let's see. Next up, we have superscript and subscript. Superscript is anytime there's like a registered trademark, or you're trying to show a square root, or sorry, a square of something, not a square root. That's how you're going to do that. You're just going to click on superscript. Alternatively, subscript will put anything below it. All right, so if you need to make annotations, or say like this is reference to that, or put another letter underneath, or whatever you want to do, however you want to use that. That's where those can be found. They're going to be found in that little drop down window. I'm not sure about newer versions of Illustrator, but that's how it is for current ones. There's also underline, which this will be faux underline and faux strike through. It's just going to do it by default. They're automatically going to do that. What else? I don't want to dive into anything else too crazy. I just wanted to focus on the basics of the text tool. There are a lot of other things you can do just to show you guys really quickly. We'll just use a common term. So I just want to show you guys, if you get really good at this kind of stuff, you know, you can create some very interesting, very you know, good looking text really quickly. You know, it doesn't take very long to do. You just have to have an idea of what you want it to look like visually, and go from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's lesson. I know it was really short, really brief. I only focused on one tool, but it's really important that you guys learn the very basics of it, so that later on we can talk about, you know, working with strokes and different fills, and what happens if you create outlines and then you want to fill all that with gradients, which we went over last week. Those are all things that we're going to cover later on. After this lesson, I'm going to pretty much dive into actual projects. I think at this point, if I haven't touched on a tool, if I use something I haven't previously when I make something interesting, or, you know, we work together to make a cool logo or whatever, I'll go over it in that lesson for you guys. But I'm going to try to keep these between 15, and in this case it's 30 minutes, or just shy of 30 minutes, at like 27-ish. So I hope you guys enjoyed the lesson. I know it went by pretty quickly, but I'm hoping that that was better than sitting through 45 minutes. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. I hope you guys learned a little bit about Illustrator and the basics of the character panel and the text tools today. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you guys for stopping by. See you.